Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm sorry this time there's no green key, but I forgot to film it and I don't have time for it now. But I promise next week you guys will get the green screen and see my face again. But it will not take away from the quality of the video. There's still are really scary stories I found. This time I found them on Reddit. And as visuals you guys see, I made some scratch art things like you did maybe like as a child. I don't know if it's only me, but as a child I loved those types of art. It was very creative and I loved it and really relaxing, so I hope you guys find it nice too. And of course also the stories. But with that being said, let's go to the video. So the story I'm going to read is one I found on Reddit. It's about a non-believer who became a believer due to the experience he had in Portsmouth, Virginia. So the story goes. I want to start off by saying I never believed in the paranormal things until these events occurred. Everything I'm going to write I only have shared with close family and a couple of friends. I've been wanting to put it down on paper and get my story out, hoping it will ease my mind a little. The time frame in which these events took place is from the 2010s and 11s. Location is in Portsmouth, Virginia. My wife and I had been married roughly a year at this point and she was pregnant with our child. We had been living in a high-rise apartment complex along the river, but with the new child we knew we needed something a little bit more substantial. I was deployed for most of her pregnancy and she was born and raised locally, so she knew the area and had the best idea of what was the best house for us. She picked out a nice little house that was built in the early 1960s, roughly 1,200 square feet, with a garage and a decent sized yard, and it met our budget. I was deployed when she signed paperwork and set up the move. An interesting tidbit that really rattled us at the end was that the landlord said since we would have small children and the carpet needed to be replaced, he wouldn't worry about any damages that occurred if it just had been cleaned. There were a couple of bad spots in the carpet that was very comparable to the typical hotel carpet. You know, the sort of stuff with funky patterns and a lot of darker brown and red stains. She agreed it wasn't worth worrying about if it kept us from having to pay to replace it eventually. Since she was pregnant, a moving company was hired to handle all the heavy lifting and her family was also happy to help. This included her uncle, a local homicide detective. When he arrived at the house, he got out of his car and looked around, almost confused. And she asked what was wrong, and he said he was pretty sure he worked for a case like this at this same house. Seeing the obvious look of panic set on my wife's face, he stopped and played it off, and said actually he parked here and worked a couple of houses down. His mistake. Spoiler alert, he wasn't wrong, you know. It really was that house. So that somewhat lays a little of groundwork. My wife had been living in the house trouble-free for a few months. Our child was due to be born late May and I got really lucky to have an opportunity to fly home early from deployment to be here for the birth. This is when everything started changing. The first night I was in the house, and really for me, from the time I stepped in, I just felt like I didn't belong in the house. Like I was some stranger's house, using their stuff and enjoying their hard work. It really was hard for me to describe that feeling. The first night, around 2:55, 3:20, we heard impossible real footsteps in the attic directly above our room. Now the house was a typical small ranch-styled house, long floor plan. The attic ran the entire length of the house. I only saw that because it needs to be understood what we were hearing. It was 100% someone walking from the end of the attic to the other end, pacing, somewhat rapidly, almost if they were thinking about something that had them irritated, and they needed to figure it out how to fix it. This went on for a solid 3 to 4 minutes. My wife started to panic a bit and told me I needed to go investigate. I was trying to play it off, figuring it must be a raccoon or something that got in the attic. At this point, I still didn't believe in the paranormal. I grabbed my pistol, a Glock 26, chambered in 9mm, a light, and went to access the point for the attic. Now there was only one way in or out attic. It's a typical drop-down door you pull with a string from the ceiling. I 100% believed when I went to the garage to go up, I would see the attic door had been opened and someone was legitimately up in there. I really believed I was about to have to shoot someone. When I got there, the attic was sealed. No one around. The back door to the garage was closed and locked. The garage door was down, just as I had left everything. I hesitated, pulled the attic door down, and somewhat to my surprise, I found the lights in the attic had been left on. Now it's entirely possible that they had been on for a while, because she never went up there, and neither had I, until this point at least. But it didn't make me think I had a homeless guy camping in my attic, so I proceeded with caution. I went up my sidearm and light as carefully as I could, but my search turned up for nothing. There was no one in the attic, no signs of anyone having been there, just nothing, really nothing. I went back downstairs, told my wife the coast was clear. Maybe it was something like pine cones falling from the roof, which is literally the biggest stretch in the world for what we heard. I knew it, she knew it. But what the hell was I supposed to say? This happened several times more, over the course of the next year. I'm not gonna go into as many details as the other events happened, but I will lay them out for you. If anyone has any thoughts on this, I'd love to hear what you all think. The first thing that happened. Sounds of conversations in other parts of the house while I was watching TV. As soon as I muted the TV, I could hear a conversation, still taking place but only for a split of a second. Almost as if whatever was talking realized I muted the TV and could hear them. It was definitely not an echo either. Another thing that happened was stuff disappearing. Literally had things like bananas or batteries on the countertop. Go get them, they're gone. Come back like an hour later to the kitchen and they are right there where I left them. This made me feel even more crazy than the other things. But I was the only one in the house, so my wife could not have moved them. Then another thing was like dishes crashing in the sink. Except we left never dishes in the sink. Everything was always cleaned, dried and put away. But we could randomly hear the sounds of like pots and pans falling in the sink. And then there were the motion activating lights in the garage. They would go off when I was home. Eventually my wife noticed it was only happening when I was home. Then another thing my wife noticed was that she was having a negative energy and anger issues in the house that started to cause issues in her marriage. At first I assumed it was postpartum depression, however that changed immediately the day we moved out, and she hasn't felt that way ever since. Now we have 3 kids. Doors open and close at their own, that's also a thing that happened. The doors that were shut and locking mechanisms engaged in the frame. This never happened when we were at the house. It was more like when we went out and came back, the doors were opened, even though we had shut them and locked them. And then the last thing was like random sounds, weird smells in the house and cold spots. I think that pretty much sums up our experience in the house. Now, when it all comes down to a head for us, was when things started going south with our landlord. He started treating my wife rudely, and when I was gone out to the sea, if she had issues, she needed the help, he was a complete jerk. To be clear, I'm not talking about problems like a clogged up toilet. I'm talking about things like our AC not working and house being 16 plus inside. He was really being a dick. This sent me off and we opted to move out of the house. While packing up a moving truck, our neighbors across the street, who had always been friendly in passing, wanted to know why we were leaving. They said the previous renters moved out after a short period of time and had complained about the house being off and something not being right. She asked if we had any experience in the house, and I shared a few of the things we had experienced. What she proceeded to tell us shocked us. She told us that for us, There was a family of 4 that lived here a long time ago. I gathered several years from the early 2000s to mid 2008. The husband was apparently a known alcoholic with anger issues, and the cops would be out and in the house routinely. Sometimes around the summer of 2008, he lost his job and the landlord was evicted his family. The dad or husband ended up taking his life in the living room, on the same carpet that my family walked across every day. The landlord had never replaced the carpet. He had cleaned it, but never took it away. The day we moved out, her uncle came to clean. He worked on that case. He was at our house and made the call that it was suicide. He also confirmed that it was the same carpet. It really freaked us out. So at the end of all of this, I'm now a believer, and also thankfully have not any other negative experiences. We had one small thing happen in the other home, but it was a one-time accident and it never occurred again. So that's everything he had to say about his experience in the house. So what do you guys think about this story? Could it be something that really happened, or was it something he imagined? Leave it down in the comments below. The next story is called Rapping on My Bedroom Walls. So let's read this person's experience. It's also from Reddit, by the way. I actually just woke up from the rapping, so I wanted to share. When this used to occur, I didn't have a Reddit account, but now that I do, I wanted to share it. When I first moved in my apartment 3 years ago, I had an old dresser from my grandfather. He had passed it down to my mother, and when I moved, she gave it to me. My first morning in the apartment was around 7 a.m. I woke up to what sounded like a knocking. Once I was a little more coherent, I realized it was coming from the dresser. It sounded like something was knocking on the back. Now, since this was my first morning, I took a breath. It's a new place, I thought to myself. I don't know all the new sounds yet, but still, I was a little bit freaked out, so I just went back to sleep. Following this, it would happen every morning between 7 and 10 a.m., usually between 10 to 20 minutes before, but never before 7 and never after 10. I don't know why, to be honest. Every now and then the rapping sounded like it was a higher above the dresser, but it always a wooden knock. Eventually I had enough. I purchased a new dresser, set up and returned the old dresser to my mom. From that point on, the rapping would be a lot higher up on the wall each morning, and now I sounded like it was coming from them. The wooden sound was gone at this point. I was really getting scared. I kept telling myself it was the piping in the walls. But I always hear the water running through the pipes from upstairs, and the sound never comes from the same time. About 6 months after living here, my boyfriend moved in with me. I only heard it 1 or 2 times after that. This hasn't happened in almost 2 years, but this morning I'm alone. We have since gotten another new dresser, but I just woke up to a loud rapping. It sounded like something was trying to push a drawer, but the drawer was stuck. It was so cold and loud I thought my boyfriend was in the room. I jumped up, but there was no one there. The knock still continued. Sounded like someone was standing in front of the dresser, going between loudly knocking on the top and struggling to shut the drawers. One strong push at a time. I just stared at it like I used to, and then I felt a cold breeze over me. That's when I decided to share the story. I want to mention that I live in the basement of a remodeled old school building. The elementary school was built in the early 1900s. It was bought in the 80s and became a nursing home. In 2010 it was turned into an apartment where I now live in. So, what do you guys think? Do you guys have advice for this girl? Or something else you want to share? Tell it in the comments. With that being said, let's go to the next story I also found on Reddit. And it's called the Disembodied Voices. Okay, this was back in 2011, when I was 19 years old. It was the first time something happened and I couldn't logically explain it, and it really frightened me. For some backstory, my parents had recently divorced and my mom moved into a rental house. It wasn't really a creepy house, just a typical nothing special house. I was raised as a Christian household, but my family was not strict in religion. but involved enough in various aspects of the church. Assemblies of God and a non-denominational at one point. Just to clarify, I had never dabbled in the occult, let alone touched a Ouija board or had been around one. My mom was raised in a house where my grandma would dabble with tarot cards, and so my mom was around things like that. I had moved out of the family home after divorce, but I was staying with my mom and her new boyfriend at the rental house because I was getting lonely and depressed, and I couldn't stand my roommate at the time. This probably only lasted for 3 months. When I was at her house alone, I would feel weird things and get weird feelings. It had a good window placement for lighting, but always felt dark, and I would feel like I wasn't alone. I never saw a ghost or anything harmful, but it just felt like something else was taking up the place there. This wouldn't happen in front of the living room and the basement, where my mom and her boyfriend had their own bedroom. I didn't go down there, as it wasn't a typical bedroom, just their stuff everywhere, and a bed, and it did spook me out down there. The things I experienced would happen in the daytime every time I was alone. The first occasion was when I was cleaning the house and had left. I got an angry call from my mom that I was supposed to tidy up and things were left out in the kitchen. I told her I did clean and nothing even was in the kitchen, nothing in the sink and nothing on the counters, as I really never cooked and her boyfriend was at work. I didn't know how the cups and bowls were on the counter. I took the yelling and discarded it. The second time I experienced time loss. I was not taking any drugs or medication. I was tidying up the guest room early afternoon where I was staying, and I went to take a nap. When I woke up, it was well into the next day. It sounds like I was just in a deep sleep, but I remember I was not that tired, and I woke up like 5 minutes later. I brushed it off. Maybe I was really tired. The one event that happened that made me not come back to the house was in December in the afternoon. I was sitting in front of the living room, and no one was home. No radios were on, no television. I was just sitting alone in silence on my phone. I started hearing sounds from 3 men having a conversation, like casual shattering but not constant. I ignored it at first, figuring out people were outside or something. It got a little bit louder, and I could never make out what was being said. Just to put this out there, I had never heard voices before, and never had I heard or in my family had never a history of schizophrenia or anything in that nature, neither on my side of the family. I got up and to look around in the house, but there was nothing, no radios, no TV. I checked the backyard, quiet as could be, not a soul inside. I checked the front street thinking maybe it was there a construction at work. Nothing inside, completely peaceful outside. I go back to where I was sitting and it initially was silent. I texted my mom asking if the street was having work done because I was hearing men talking and there was nobody anywhere. She said no. About 5 minutes pass and I hear the talking again. Now I get annoyed and feel like a little bit crazy. I start to try to walk towards where I'm hearing these voices for like 15 minutes. I'm realizing that I'm hearing them closer to the vent near the window. The vent above the basement. I'm hearing the voices as I near the vent, and when I come up to it, complete silence. Baffled, I go back to the chair, and almost immediately the voices resume. The week prior, my mom told me that she was sleeping in the basement, and woke up almost at 4 a.m. in a fright at the end of her bed, 2 overly large black poodles with big red eyes staring at them sleeping. She nudged her boyfriend awake. When they saw them too, he said the dogs charged at them and they vanished. She would also start becoming very out of character, violent, agitated, easily enraged. I checked it up to post-divorce scoping at first, but after a while I couldn't blame that anymore. I left the house and I didn't come back. I have never heard voices like that again in that house. I don't believe in ghosts, I very much believe in demons. I don't know what was in that house and I don't want to find it out in the hard way. Whatever was wanted to be known. What do you guys think about this story? Do you think it's a true story? Have you ever experienced something like that? Just let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. I hope you guys liked the stories and also liked what I made on my sketch paper. If you guys have other recommendations for videos or for stories, don't hesitate to let me know in the comment section down below. And I hope you guys see you guys next time, next week, next Sunday normally. And normally you will see my face then. So till then, bye bye.